One of the most urgent tasks for our country is to decisively defeat the climate hysteria hoax.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction.
The ability of CO2 to do the heavy work of creating a climate catastrophe is almost nil at this point.
The price of oil has been artificially elevated to the point of insanity.
That's not how you power a modern industrial system.
The ultimate goal of this renewable energy, plan is to reach the exact same point that we're at now.
You know who's tried that? Germany. 7 straight days of no wind for Germany. Their factories are shutting down.
They really do act like weather didn't happen prior to 1910.
Today is Friday.
That's right, Greta. It is Friday. This is the best day of the week, and not just because the weekend is almost here, because it is the day the Heartland Institute broadcasts the Climate Realism Show. Also, happy Friday the 13th to all who celebrate it. My name is Tim Lakely. I am the Vice President of the Heartland Institute. We are an organization that has been around for 40 years, and we are known as the leading global think tank pushing back on climate alarmism. Heartland and this show bring you the data, the science, the truth, and, when we're very fortunate, excellent guests to counter the alarmist narrative on the climate that you've been fed every day of your life. There is nothing else quite like the Climate Realism Show streaming anywhere. So I hope you will bring friends to view this live stream every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, and also like, share, and subscribe, and leave your comments underneath the video. These all convince YouTube's algorithm to smile upon this program, and that gets this show in front of even more people. And as a reminder, because big tech and the legacy media do not really approve of the way we cover climate and energy on this program, Heartland's YouTube channel has been demonetized. So if you want to support this program, and I really hope you do, please visit heartland.org/TCRS. That's heartland.org/TCRS, which stands for the Climate Realism Show. And you can help make sure that this show is brought to the world every single week. Any support you can give is warmly welcome and greatly appreciated. And we also want to thank today our streaming partners, those being junkscience.com, CFACT, What's Up With That, the CO2 Coalition, and Heartland UK Europe. I hope you will find and follow all of these accounts on social media, and also subscribe to the YouTube and Rumble channels of the Heartland Institute. So you can always follow this show, and be sure to hit that subscription bell as well. Got a big show today, very kind of our annual hurricane preview season show today, but let's introduce everybody on the show today. We have with us Anthony Watts. He's Senior Fellow at the Heartland Institute and the publisher of the world's most viewed website on climate change, What's Up With That? Sterling Burnett, the Archbishop of Canterbury, also known as the director of the Arthur B. Robinson Center on Climate and Environmental Policy at the Heartland Institute. Linnea Lukin, Research Fellow for Energy and Environment Policy at Heartland. And we also, of course, have Andy Singer, as always, our producer and Senior Digital Manager at Heartland, making sure this show is looking great and flowing very professionally. And we're happy to welcome back to the show our old friend and also a fan of this show, Stanley Goldenberg, who is a hurricane research meteorologist. Stan's going to preview the 2025 hurricane season for us, and he's been doing this job for decades. There are few in the United States that are better at this job than he. Welcome back to the show, Stan.
Glad to be with you. That few is a large number, but that's okay. Thanks for the compliment.
Yes. And again, a fan of the show. We've seen you so often in the comments section. And you've even shot me a text or two to comment on the show while it's live. So thanks for being on the show, moving from viewer to participant.
I wish I could watch every single show. It's so fascinating. Really,
you
great.
can watch every single show. They all automatically archive. Just go to
I
the
know.
YouTube page and find it on your phone. You can watch it anytime you want. All right. But first, before we get into the hurricane preview for 2025, let's get into our favorite segment on this program, the crazy climate news of the week. Hit it, Andy. All right. So I'm sorry, I had a little glitch there on my own computer. Let's see. So our first item today is titled Get Out, Greta. So ABC, this comes from ABC News out of Australia. The headline is Israel deports Greta Thunberg after boarding Gaza-bound Freedom Flotilla ship. Swedish activist Greta Thunberg is en route to Sweden after being deported from Israel. The 22-year-old and other crew members were detained aboard a charity boat as it neared Gaza on Monday. The activists were carrying humanitarian aid, including rice and baby formula, and said they wanted to raise international awareness about the crisis in Gaza, just in case you hadn't heard about it, which has been devastated by months of war. Now, Greta has famously eschewed flying because of its carbon footprint, so she's at least kept to that conviction, as many of her contemporaries in the alarmist movement have not. But the amount of grain and baby formula and medical supplies that they had with them on hand was very small. Less than a single truckload has been reported. So this really was just all a publicity stunt. Anthony, I think perhaps Greta is starting to feel a little bit neglected. And the fact that so here she is back in the news for something else.
She's basically becoming irrelevant at warp speed these days. She gave up on climate because she'd figured out maybe I've got more pull or exposure or whatever with, slamming the Israelis. And I would point out that about a year or so ago, we had a segment on here where there was a stuffed octopus in the video, which was some kind of a symbol, an anti-Semitic symbol by most standards. And yet she denied that. She said, "Oh no, that's just a stuffed toy. It just happened to be in the video." Well, I'm calling BS on that based on her current actions. Interesting thing, if they had let her in to Gaza, very good chance that she would have been kidnapped and exploited and ransomed, just like anybody else who's coming into there that they think that they might be able to exploit. So probably the IDF, as you pointed out on some private chat, Jim, probably saved her life.
Yeah.
Some people were mocking her for being on an airplane. Of course, the Israelis, I suspect, didn't give her much choice in that. But if she really wanted to hold to her convictions, the Israelis could have been kind and put her in a floating raft, one of those inflatables, and said, "Okay, sail back. You keep to your convictions," rather than putting her on an airplane. I'm hoping once they get clear of the other concerns that we all know they have right now, that they auction off the boat they went in very cheaply, and I can purchase it on the cheap.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know. I almost didn't even put this in the rundown for the crazy climate news of the week, but it was such a big international news story. And putting the Israeli Palestinian conflict aside, the just the spectacle of Greta, I guess not worrying about the climate so much anymore. There's something more important to her, which actually we share in common. I think there's a lot of things in the world more important than trying to stop climate change. So for once, Greta, we are in agreement. All right. Item number 2. The climate alarmists who think that human activity can control the climate have a new plan, and it's to nuke the ocean floor. Sterling Burnett was the one who brought this to us this week, so this should be pretty interesting. This story comes from IFL Science. Headline, Wild New Carbon Capture Idea Suggests Tackling Climate Change with Massive Undersea Nuclear Explosions. The lead here, and this is written from a very, very alarmist perspective, and the lead says, the situation is bad when someone suggests detonating a nuclear weapon will make things better. That is the idea proposed by one scientist who believes a controlled nuclear explosion on the sea floor could help reduce atmospheric carbon, he means carbon dioxide, lessening the effects of climate change. Now, this story has got a bunch of filler in it, so I'm just going to try to cut to the chase. One of the carbon dioxide capturing schemes is to, quote, find ways to accelerate natural weathering of rocks that are known to absorb greenhouse gases, unquote. Andy Haverly at Rochester Institute of Technology says, quote, the natural breakdown of silicate rocks, such as basalt, could significantly aid in carbon capture, especially if larger quantities of it could be pulverized quickly. So, and reading back here from the story again, in his proposal, Haverly envisions using an 81 gigaton range nuclear explosion to break up around 3.886 trillion tons of basalt. To put this into perspective, the largest ever nuclear explosion, known as the Tsar Bomba, had a yield of 50 megatons. which is the equivalent of 50 million tons of TNT. A 1 gigaton explosion would be 20 times more powerful than this historical example. So you can imagine how ridiculously enormous an 81 gigaton device might be. At present, nothing like this has ever been built or tested, and Haverly's paper is pretty light on how such an explosive could be created and transported safely to its intended destination and then installed at the desired depth at the bottom of the ocean. He does admit that this would cause a lot of environmental damage, I suppose, to his credit, not the least of which it would be nuclear fallout. And we should point out that this is a paper that has not yet been peer-reviewed that he has written. So, Sterling, you're the one who alerted us to this crazy climate idea. To me, it sounds pretty practical. What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, what could go wrong? I thought the wackiest ideas was putting umbrellas over the earth to block the sun because we don't like the sun now. But this is definitely off the crazy end of the scale. We work for, people, I suppose that, people like Greenpeace and others have worked for decades to stop above ground nuclear testing, to stop ocean nuclear testing. To be fair to this guy, you don't have to have that one bomb. Why don't you just string a lot of them along the ocean floor and blow them all up? Who cares about the sea life? Who cares about the radiation? All that matters is climate change, despite the fact that no more hurricanes, no more tornadoes, no more drought. It's the crisis. Honestly, when someone puts this forward, I just don't know what they're thinking. Are they supposed to be taken seriously? It's not published in peer-reviewed literature. It's being considered. But if I were the editor getting this, I would just, after I stopped laughing, I would send it back as, please see your local psychiatrist, because this is madness. This is how, this is like the people that say, there's too many people. What we need is about 200 million people, and we'll figure out how to get there. Well, this might be a good way of getting there. Just exploding nuclear bombs to save us from climate change. That doesn't sound like a good idea to me.
I mean, we should be clear, though. This isn't something like they're not proposing a test case at all. This is just another, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of papers like this, not just in the climate area, but in every area. You can write a paper proposing anything you want. It doesn't mean that they're doing it. It doesn't mean that they're actually going to test this anywhere. What it means is that some dork is trying to get funding so that he can keep his job. And he can keep, it's publish or perish, like we said before, or like I think Jim said even yesterday on the show. So this is someone who had to come up with a research paper. He wanted to add the climate angle because, of course, and you can get tons of funding for the climate angle. And he's like, what can we do? I know, nuke the ocean. And maybe we can get a good computer simulation out of it, and it'll make really cool graphics and stuff, and then we'll get a little bit of press, and I'll be able to get funding for my next project that I really actually intend to do something with. But it seems to me that the vast majority of papers that are published right now in the climate area, and also in a lot of physics and stuff, there's no test that they plan on doing. There's no hypothesis that can be tested. They're just firing stuff at the wall so that they can keep publishing. And that's it. That's the end of it. So no, I'm not worried. This doesn't concern me. I mean, any more than any, idiot plan concerns me when it's in the published research.
I agree. I'm not concerned about it. I thought it was just so idiotic and crazy that someone would propose it. But if I'm this person's department chair, him proposing something like this does not make me more likely to continue funding his position. It makes me less likely. If I'm a peer-reviewed editor, it does not make me more likely to think, gosh, I need to accept some more papers from this guy. He's really a forward thinker. I don't see how this serves the cause you just described. It's madness.
It is. And, It's that whole publish or perish thing that goes on in universities. They have this pressure to keep publishing stuff, even if it's crap, and a lot, as Linnea pointed out, a lot of it is. It's just simply filler material to say, well, our prestigious university published 12,872 papers in the last year. Big deal. But that keeps their whole funding mill going, and that's the purpose of this kind of crazy stuff.
Let me ask a question before we move on to our next item here. But two things, actually. One, the idea that it's practical and that we need to be capturing carbon dioxide emissions and dealing with them somehow by capturing them and putting places. And also this idea that, according to this, that accelerating natural weathering of rocks that are known to absorb greenhouse gases. I mean, how, on those two levels, what are we supposed to think about that?
Well, the first one, of course, I think all of us on here, I guess I won't speak for Stan or the others, but I'll speak for myself. I don't believe we should be capturing CO2, that it's a danger to us. It's good for plants. I don't think it is the sole cause of warming, but even the warming is not a crisis. But to the second one, what was the second one again, Jim? It was, the weathering of rock. That's well known. They're already doing that. They are doing that on the surface. They're grinding up rocks. There've been test cases where they're doing that on the surface. They're scattering certain types of rock dust in farmers' fields to absorb more carbon. So that experiment is going on. There are rocks that when weathered, absorb carbon. There's no question about that. Just like there are rocks that, most limestone is accretions of carbon over time. And that's why when we break it up for cement, we're releasing carbon into the atmosphere. But the idea that we go to the ocean floor, blow up a large chunk of it, and all that rocks and dust is going to somehow get to the surface, and except maybe in the mushroom cloud, I guess, and then start absorbing carbon. So many stupid things about this proposal. If this gets published and I was the department or the university, it would be published this and perish.
Very good. All right, let's move on to our next item so we can have more time for the Hurricane 2025 preview. I've titled this one, Trump Pulls the Plug on EVs. This comes out of Politico, and this falls into the good climate news category. Trump revokes California's nation-leading electric vehicle mandate. I'll read a bit here from it. Trump signed 3 Congressional Review Act resolutions rolling back a trio of California's rules at a White House signing ceremony, delivering on his day one executive order to quickly roll back electric vehicle mandates around the country. While the Trump administration has also gone on the offensive against federal vehicle standards, California's regulations aimed at phasing out gas-powered passenger vehicles and heavy-duty diesel trucks, which are followed by a dozen other states, have drawn the stiffest opposition from the auto and fossil fuel industries. Quote, worse than unachievable, these EV mandates were going to be harmful, said John Bozzella, president and CEO of the Alliance for Automotive Innovation. Quote, harmful to auto affordability, to consumer choice, to industry competitiveness, and to economic activity. Let me start with you here, Linnea, if I will. I mean, how big of a deal is this, do you think? And why is it a big deal? I know that a lot of our friends in the climate realism world, like Steve Malloy, who's been a guest on this program several times, are pretty excited about this development.
Well, I think it's good. I mean, I'm still, I'm being cautiously optimistic about it. You know, Trump administration part 1 attempted to pull the plug on some of this stuff, and it just got put right back when he left. I'm hoping that the California waiver goes away and stays gone, because it really is sort of absurd for the one state to be able to control the entire automotive industry, even if they have the biggest single share of the industry in the United States. It's completely inappropriate. And any state could try to take the reins and control any industry that they want in that case. And I don't know. I don't have too much detail to say on this one, Jim. I'm cautiously optimistic. I think it needs to go. But
I think Stan wants to weigh in.
No, I think he's adjusting his lighting there.
No. What happens is the lights automatically turn off in my office.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Then if he's not wanting to weigh in, I'll weigh in. I
should
guess
turn my camera.
I guess to some extent, I'm less cautiously optimistic. I'm very optimistic. Right now, this is being challenged in court. But you got to remember, this isn't a Trump executive order. This was a law passed by Congress. I don't see how the states have any standing to overturn this. And the way they did it through the Congressional Review Act, it was a controversial use, but it passed. The way they did it, it says not only is this not the rule, but they cannot offer anything in the future that looks like this ever. So no waiver can be given in the future on this particular topic to California or the other states that follow California. So the only question is, will the courts uphold the law? Because this was something Trump wanted, but it was passed through both houses of Congress as a Congressional Review Act resolution of disapproval.
Yeah. And the reason we discuss these sorts of topics on the Climate Realism Show is that getting rid of the internal combustion engine and putting everybody into an electric vehicle that they can't afford, that, as somebody in our comments pointed out, are harder on the roads, which you need, asphalt, which takes oil to repair. I know that I saw a tweet today, I guess, what do they call them on X posts today, that Ed Miliband, the climate czar of the UK, and we have a lot of viewers of this show in the United Kingdom, is still, he tripled down on his dedication to mandating only EV vehicles by 2030. And California, I think, had the same mandate. Maybe it was 2032 or 2035. But it's environmentally actually more destructive to create EVs than it is to just keep going with increasingly efficient gas cars. Anthony, you want to add anything to this, since you have escaped from the People's Republic of California to a undisclosed location outside of that place?
yeah. Well, I'll say this. I was an early adopter of electric cars. So I have an innate understanding of how they work from an engineering standpoint and an operational standpoint. The bottom line is they're okay for doing, short errands and that kind of stuff around town, which is the majority of travel. But they're absolutely useless when it comes to a long trip or towing something or hauling something. They just don't have any real utility beyond short trips. And so if you want to have an electric car to, save the planet and run around and get your groceries and stuff, more power to you. But that shouldn't be mandated. That should be a choice of the person and their viewpoint. And this whole thing brings back choice to the people, which is what it's all about.
I would like to make one last point on this, Jim, following up on you. You listed all the things that are problematic. Well, one of the things, Anthony didn't mention it, but of course, they're also not so good in extreme weather, either heat or extreme cold. They lose power fast. But as importantly as all that, as California tries to force the country to go into this, at the same time, it's actively working to destroy the electric power grid that are supposed to power all these things, which is why every year in California, when the lights go out, blinker out, blackouts, brownouts rolling across the state because of their power system, what is one of the first things that Gavin Newsom says not to do? Don't charge your electric vehicle. So you don't have the power to get anywhere because everyone's got an electric vehicle. You can't charge it, and you don't have power. Yeah. It's as the grid becomes less stable, the idea that we need to add more demand on electric on a less stable electric grid through mandating electric cars is just foolishness writ large.
Yeah. Stan, you wanted to weigh in here quick?
Well, first, before I say anything, let me always state that I am here on my own time as a personal citizen, and my views do not necessarily represent those of my employee. But you're saying stuff that's very related to hurricane stuff, because I cannot imagine a massive evacuation from a hurricane with electric vehicles. You can be stuck in traffic for many, many hours. That happened during Andrew, and Andrew, only a small portion of the people decide to evacuate. And what happens if you run out of power? Well, maybe if you carry a generator in your car, gas powered generator, mind you, in your car, you get sorry, it's so funny to think of it, but it's serious. You cannot do that. So that's another kind of inclement weather. The battery will work, but it'll only get you so far. And so this is, as we know, all these ridiculous rules are in the name of the god of, catastrophic man-made climate change. And that's what they're, pushing these things. And if they were real, if this really was a real catastrophe, then maybe some of the rules would be reasonable. But as you show in your show, some of the rules don't even make sense, even if it was a catastrophe. So thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, Sterling pointed out, and you followed up on the fact that these electric vehicles are just not reliable in severe weather situations, whether it's temperature extremes, storms, whatever. And because of that, we have not seen yet, at least not that I'm not aware of, no one has invented an electric storm chaser vehicle out there looking for tornadoes, and no one has invented or even suggested an electric hurricane hunter airplane. So, when those things happen, maybe they've reached the point of reliability.
Wait, Anthony, how do you know? Wait, how do you know we don't have an electric hurricane hunter plane in the works right now? You never,
right. It's a big secret.
You never know.
It's one of those things that they're called UFOs. People see them and it's a UFO. I would say also during hurricanes or even other non-hurricanes, storms here in Dallas, do you want to drive an electric vehicle through standing water? Electric vehicles already have a problem with spontaneous combustion, and water entering the battery pack tends to accelerate that happenstance. I mean, we've seen it post hurricanes with electric vehicles catching fire in the driveways of their owners after the hurricane passed because of the saltwater incursion.
Yep, that's true. Yep. All right. Well, I'm sure when we were covering hurricane season throughout the season this year on the Climate Realism Show, I am certain we'll find some video on X of storm surge causing horrible fires thanks to electric vehicles being in somebody's garage. All right. One last item here on the crazy climate news of the week, and it's forgive us for being a little self-indulgent. This comes from Desmog Blog, which normally I would never read from Desmog Blog. It is filled with tons of lies about the Heartland Institute and also all of our allies in the climate realism movement. But we just could not resist this one. And this was a big story from this week. Headline, How MAGA Lobbying is Undermining EU Climate Rules. European leaders are bending to the demands of U.S. climate science deniers. That would be us, although we don't like that description because it's not accurate. Let me read from this a little bit. Quote, the CSDDD is the greatest threat to America's sovereignty since the fall of the Soviet Union, unquote. The Heartland Institute, a pro-Trump U.S. think tank, tweeted on March 31st. The Heartland Institute is one of the world's leading climate science denial groups. It has helped to draft Donald Trump's anti-climate policies, which have seen the president pledge to drill, baby, drill for more fossil fuels and once again pull the U.S. out of the flagship 2015 Paris Agreement. Over recent months, along with a host of other Trump allies, the Heartland Institute has set its sights on a new target, the EU's Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, also known as CSDDD. This vague acronym belies the potentially transformative impact of the new law, in their opinion. It is in its original form, the CSDDD sought to require large companies and those in high-risk sectors trading in the EU to address human rights and environmental issues in their own operations and in their supply chains. High turnover companies would also have been forced to adopt a plan to align with the Paris Agreement, including setting emissions reductions targets. The Heartland Institute and its anti-climate, anti-regulation peers are vocal opponents of the law and launch an aggressive campaign to water it down or to even see it scrapped entirely. Andy, there's a link to our paper on this, which is what sparked all of this, that you might be able to put up on the screen. But Sterling, Desmog just can't quit us, but you have to feel pretty good about Heartland being blamed for more EU countries getting cold feet about going all in for good on climate communism, right?
Well, I'll say this. the countries, the smog evidently knows what's best for the world, because I suspect that the countries that are embracing our position are not blaming us for destroying sound rules. They're praising us. They're thanking us. In fact, they've had James over there a few times for leading the way, shining a light on the green climate scam and the dangers to modern industrial society. And it is to me, it's pretty gratifying to be the tick under this skin of the people at DeSmog and others like Politico and others that persist in promoting the great climate crisis lie. They recognize what we say, but some may question whether that's a fair assessment, that we're the leading voice on this. And they're the ones, they consider us a pretty small think tank fighting way above our weight. They consider us the true danger. So I think that says, to be fair, I think that says something about us.
And says something good for sure.
We got a call out in the Guardian the other day too, from one of the I can't find it now. But anyway, yeah, we live rent free, absolutely rent free in everybody's heads.
Yeah, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. All right. Well, we lost Stan there for a second and brought him right back, which is very nice. There it is. So yeah, Andy, thanks for bringing that up. Major U.S. climate website to be shut down after all staff fired. Now I remember it, Linnea. There's been so much news about Heartland this week. I almost forgot about this. Yeah. So the website climate.gov is being shut down. And there was a quote in there where they were worried. Yeah, they're the worst case scenario. There it is. Thanks, Andy. I can read it right from the screen. Lindsay said she also feared a, quote, sinister possibility that the Trump administration may co-opt climate.gov to publish its own anti-science content. Lindsay said the administration could now, quote, provide a content team from the Heartland Institute, leveraging our audience, our brand, our millions of people that we reach on social media every month. That's the worst case scenario. And if anyone from the Trump administration is listening, if you want to redirect climate.gov to something useful, you can send them right to climate@aglance.com. So it's very easy to do a redirect. You can get an intern to do it. Just so when you type in climate.gov, you end up at climate@aglance.com, and there will be actual real science and data explaining what's going on in the climate. Public service announcement over, and a big smile to the face of Anthony Watts. All right. Before we get to the preview of the 2025 hurricane season, I wanted to share. We usually have a segment we call Meme of the Week. This is, if you can put it up on screen, Andy. I found this from our friend Matthew Wylicki on X this morning, and it says here: scientists say Earth's warming could set off wide disruptions. And I'll read from it here for people just listening. A continuing rise in average global sea level, which is likely to amount to more than 1.5 feet by the year 2100. This, say the scientists, would inundate parts of many heavily populated river deltas and cities on them, making them uninhabitable, and would destroy many beaches around the world. And Matt highlighted this part. At the most likely rate of rise, some experts say most of the beaches on the east coast of the United States would be gone in 25 years. This story was written in the New York Times by William K. Stevens on September 18th, 1995. So, Stan, I know you live in Florida. I think all the beaches are still there last time I checked, but I thought I'd highlight that as a woefully bad prediction from the experts who think their every opinion should rule the world. All right, we'll leave it there. No comment, but I just like to highlight that stuff. All right. So let's get into our main topic then today, and that is a preview of the hurricane season of 2025. I saw a post and so Stan, you'll be taking over the show here in a moment. I saw a post by our friend Steve Malloy on X about a story, I think in the Washington Post, that the hurricane season is now 2 weeks in, and there have been 0 storms that have formed at all in the Atlantic Basin. And it had, I think, either the Washington Post or New York Times wondering what the heck's going on. So I hope in your presentation, you'll be able to help explain that for us.
Well, thank you. Here I come. And, we're going to switch to hurricanes, all things hurricanes. But I want to make a couple comments first. I hadn't put up that slide. Oh, by the way, there are still beaches down here, just to let you know. I put up this slide because when we deal with the word climate, I get infuriated at how the term is bastardized. And so basically, AGW, that old term anthropogenic, i.e., man-made global warming, otherwise known as Al Gore warming, or ACC, anthropogenic climate change. So many people just say the word climate change, and they say, "Well, what do you feel about climate change?" I said, "Ask me if I believe in climate change." So they asked me. I said, "Yes, the climate is always changing." Oh, you're talking about man-made climate change. That's a different topic. So on that third point there, W is not the same as global warming. We have warming periods and cooling periods. It's not the same as climate change, and it's definitely not the same as climate. Climate's a huge field. And sadly, there's some in Congress and some on the conservative side that they sit there and think, to wave my hands again, put my lights back on, but they sit there and think they see the word climate. People are asking the public, are you concerned about climate? And of course, they're talking about anthropogenic climate change. And in fact, if you go further, they're talking about catastrophic anthropogenic climate change. Let's talk about a little bit. It's catastrophic. And as I said on there's many scientists like myself, some specializing in climate, that do not agree we are about to experience catastrophic anthropogenic climate change. So you can take that slide down. But we can go into the hurricane slides, switch to that. I want to make also a comment that you all were talking about published papers before. And I work with a research institution. As I said before, I'm doing this on my own time. My views don't necessarily reflect those of my employer, although most of this they would agree with. But published paper, it's nice when something's published because it is subject to anonymous peer review. So that does weed out some of the garbage, but it depends who the reviewers are. And when I review a paper, I take it very seriously. I reviewed a paper recently. It was a hurricane climate fluctuation paper, and it took 3 times to get past me because I demanded the person do this and this and this, and they did. Just because it's published, though, doesn't make it right. And just because it's not published doesn't mean it's not valid. So just a good balance from a published research scientist myself. Okay, so we're going to talk about and you want to consider making that bigger. The picture is bigger. They can take me out, or you can leave it like that. But I want to talk about the NOAA's May outlook for the 2025 Atlantic hurricane season. And just for fun, and go back to that, I just want to say this is a consensus from the National Hurricane Center, Climate Prediction Center, and our lab with the Hurricane Research Division, Physical Oceanography Division. I've been involved with this for 26 years now or so. I was one of the first authors of this. So let's go on to the next slide. And I just had to throw out the names. You all memorize it real quick. And right away, I'll mention, no, we haven't had the A storm yet. And people, there come my lights back on because I moved. You haven't had the A storm yet. And the point is, the peak 3 months, I'm going to show another slide later, of the hurricane season are August, September, October. We have extremely busy years with hardly anything before the middle of August. June and July are hiccup months. Sometimes you have something, sometimes you don't. They can be short-lived. Last year, we had a Cat 5 in June, late June. That was incredibly unusual. We do occasionally have major hurricanes in June or July, but it's not the norm. Most of the activity is August, September, October. I get bothered when people say, oh, the season's starting slow, and they said it was going to be busy. I said, it hasn't started yet. So, by the way, I was on the list 1 year, and Hurricane Stan hit Guatemala, killed a bunch of people, so they took my name off right away. Okay, next slide. So these are basically the conditions that we are expecting during which months? August, September, October. That's really what we zero in on. I've seen a lot of studies focus on the whole season or June or July, this and this. I don't think there's a lot of predictability in those months. These are the key months, and this is when most of the activity happens. And you have most of the activity come out of that area in the middle on the bottom, the main development region. That actually comes from one of my papers way back in 1996. If I would have known how popular it was going to be, we would have called it the Goldenberg-Shapiro region. But that's where most of the storms start to form, most of the strong storms start to form, and we expect lower vertical shear, the difference between the upper and lower layers. So the lower that is, the lower that difference is, it allows the hurricane to organize in the vertical. Sea surface temperatures in that area a little bit above normal. We expect ENSO neutral, meaning not an El Nino, not a La Nina, but kind of in the middle, and you can have very busy years during that. El Nino conditions tend to suppress activity. And I won't go into everything. We'll go to the next slide. And this is some of the stuff that goes into it. I mean, we have all sorts of models that we look at and certain algorithm statistics and things like that. And we average all those and look at that. But then the team looks at everything, and it's a true consensus. You know, you can't trust when something says consensus. She's the last person that edits it controls the narrative. But in this particular thing, this really is a consensus. We have our team, I forgot if it's 7 people or 8 people, and we all put in our ranges for all the activities, and that is simply divided. And people can change it, you can persuade others, you can intimidate others to change their outlooks, but that is it. So if we go to the next slide, and by the way, if you're sending anything, any chats to me, the team, it's hard for me to read them while I'm on and talking, but I'll try and look. Okay, so here is our outlook. We're expecting 60% chance of above normal, 30% chance of normal. So those two combined are 90%. That's going to be normal above normal, very little chance of being below normal. And let me say, in my experience, by golly, if you have even normal range of activity, it's a lot of activity. And those are the ranges we're forecasting. Next slide. I'll go quickly through these. This is last year at this time. 85% above normal. Now, we were not forecasting this would be the most active season ever. We just had a lot of certainty that would be above average. And some people might remember we had that 2 or 3 weeks right in the middle of the peak of the season that it kind of went dead. And we were kind of surprised, but it picked up again, and we ended up having a very, very busy season. Next slide. And this is the reason we update our outlook in August, because there you see June, July, and dribbles of activity, and then you hit August, September, October. And that's where most of the activity occurs. So we update the outlook in August. And the neat thing about updating in August is the climate factors are pretty much already in position. And then thank you, Andy, and already in position. So we're not predicting as far in advance all the way from May. Go ahead, next slide. Just looking at the verification from last year, if you look at that middle column, and the red is the actuals versus our forecast, is that we were your dear friend Michael Manns from Penn State outlook. He was off the chart with the activity and thankfully did not verify. But we're not always like this, but hey, you got to hit it right at some point. Go ahead, next slide.
Hey, Stan, has he made any pronouncements this year about, massive hurricanes because of climate change?
Wait, do you mean pronouncements about who he's going to sue and bring to court, or hurricane? Anyway, I actually haven't heard it yet. Maybe after he really busted last year. He was saying as many as 30 named storms. Maybe after he busted last year, he's not going to. We'll see what he does. So back to this. Oh, go ahead, Andy.
Ever since he's gone over to Blue Sky and isolated himself with his yes men minions, we really haven't heard much publicly from him. So maybe he's becoming just like Greta. He's becoming irrelevant now.
Oh my. Well, I still have my wooden hockey stick that I got at ICCC in honor of Dr. Mann. So here's a perspective. So what we have seen are multi-decadal fluctuations in overall activity. That means a few decades of mainly above normal, a few decades of lower, and a few decades above. And so back before 1970, we had a lot of very active times. From 71 to 94, not a single year was what we call hyperactive, and very few even above average. And then starting in 95, we entered another active era, and you can see the forecast on the right and how it fares with those. So another above average year, again, is what we're predicting. And now if you go to the next slide, I wanted to highlight on the official site for this outlook, and excuse me while I mute while I cough. Got it. They want to blow your eardrums out. This is under in that figure legend. That ACE is this accumulated cyclone energy, an overall measure of activity for the season. And I won't go into how it's calculated, but we stayed on there that it is undercounted by an unknown amount before the 70s and even during the 70s and 80s. So in this before the 70s, it's lack of satellite data. In the 70s and 80s, it's poor quality satellite data. So, people understand we started getting satellite data in early 70s, but they're very different from what we look at right now. And even as late as when I came on board, 1980, even the end of the 80s, they still had a long way to go. And the reason this is important, if you go to the next slide, is that so many studies that I have seen start their study in the 70s. Why? Oh, we have satellite data, so the data is a lot better. So what do you do when you go from a low activity to a high activity area? And this is in all sorts of metrics. I see paper after paper after paper like this. You end up with a trend, and you say everything's getting worse. We're having more hurricanes. They're getting stronger, this and this. But if you pull back the curtain with the next slide, you see that, oh, yeah, there was something before that. And the reason I showed that thing about these ACE is undercounted. If you look at that early era, it looks like, well, it's not as active as the current active era. There were lots of storms, even at their peak intensity, that were not being observed. I wouldn't say we missed a lot of the storms, but we certainly missed a lot of their peak intensity, and we probably even missed some storms as well, and there's been studies on that. So let's go to the next slide here. And I want to stress this because I'm talking to the public, not just as, Heartland. I consider this stuff important, that years with similar levels of activity, it's not might. They will have very different impacts. It's not how intense the storms are, but where and when they hit. So the impact is affected by population, the building codes, and boy, do those vary widely. Ocean topography, because that affects how much storm surge, the speed the storm is traveling, storm size, structure, high tide, low tide, all those kind of things. You have Cat 4 Hurricane Brett, which hardly anybody, plane jet overhead, hardly anybody remembers outside of us hurricane people, hit the Texas coast, but almost one of the least populated areas of the Texas coast, with all respect for the cows that live there, and caused very, very little damage and one death. Then you had Cat 4 Ian hit the southwest Florida coast, $113 billion in damage and 150 deaths. And Katrina, which is just a Cat 3 when it hit, 108 billion, 1,800 deaths. And Brett was 140 miles an hour. And it could have been a little bit to the north, hit Corpus Christi, hit Galveston, Houston. It would have made a big, big difference. It's like two out of control trucks. One just hits a wall, so poor truck. One hits a crowd, and you're going to get a much different impact. So let's go to the next thing, because I really emphasize this, because we could have the exact same amount of activity this year as last year. That's Brett, by the way, and where it hit on a very low area. And even the rainfall amounts were very, very impressive, 15 inches, but you didn't have it fall on a populated city like Houston. Go to the next one. I'll zip through all these. And here's 3 hyperactive, meaning above 165% of normal. I came up with that definition. I have 11 kids, so I can talk about hyperactive. And 1995, 246%. This was the first of the current active era. Total of only 12. 3,100 deaths, mostly in Haiti, and it was really from rainfall flooding. And you had 2017, 295 billion in damage. I mean, it varies tremendously for the same overall level of activity. So even though we're predicting above average, I can't tell you where they're going to hit and exactly where. Even, if you go to the next slide, even something like Hurricane Andrew, if you look on the left, the red is the most populated, densest, costly area of Miami-Dade County. The storm hit in the yellow area, the least populated area. If it had been just 10 or 15 miles to the north, it would have been triple the damage and possibly the deaths, devastation, everything. And you have these two storms, Floyd and Andrew, same intensity, same location, very different size, and therefore very different impact. Next slide. And my favorite storm, Hurricane Andrew, we call that the bagel that ate Miami. And if you go to the next one, I always have to show why I take these things very seriously, not just my science, but my house got impacted by Andrew. I had a girl 12 hours before the eye wall hit. For those who don't know my story, it's got the link on the bottom there that you can actually see on National Geographic Special. These are all pictures of what was my house. It's still a vacant lot. We were renting from my in-laws, still a vacant lot. Almost 33 years later, nobody rebuilt. They're going to make a shrine there, the Goldenberg Shrine. But so I take these very seriously. Next slide. And people should also realize the impact of hurricanes. When we had this horrible flooding in North Carolina, that's some of the highest elevation east of the Mississippi. NOAA predicted for days that there would be a lot of rainfall. In fact, they had a lot of rainfall before the storm got there, but they were predicting copious amounts of rainfall. This was not a surprise. It's horrible. It was a horrible disaster, but they knew this was going to happen because a hurricane, when it hits land, you have the storm surge, the wall of water that comes in that you don't want to be in the way of that. You have tornadoes, which we had horrendous tornadoes last year from Hurricane Milton, some of the strongest tornadoes we had seen in Southeast Florida. That was in a band of Milton. You have disruption, the power going out, all sorts of other things. And then you have flat out the wind damage. And then you have, like I said, the rainfall damage. So all these things are typical with a hurricane. And it just depends where it hits on how bad these are. With Andrew, we had 16 feet of storm surge, but our area is called Cutler Ridge. So it's built a little bit up on a ridge, so it didn't inundate as far. Next slide. And what's really to take away from the outlook, really for the public, you got to get ready every year, because it doesn't matter if it's a slow year like 1992 with Andrew or a busy year like 1995 where we didn't get anything down here. But we like putting out the outlooks. One of the things is it helps kind of know emergency managers, people like that, evaluate the resources. But the key is that you gotta be, it's good for hurricane season awareness, makes people think about what's happening. And the motto is get ready and stay ready. And I want to stop there. We can talk about the hurricanes and man-made climate change and stuff more if you like. I do have slides ready for that, but let me pass it back to you all if you have any questions or discussion.
None so far.
Oh, I'd have to make my main prediction. I don't
Okay.
know if our outlook will be right, but I predict with 100% certainty, you can bank on it, that if we have a strong storm this year, especially a disaster, someone, not just one, will blame it on man-made climate change without question. In fact, there was a paper that came out of, what was it, Harvard, Yale, something like that last year, a study that showed that virtually every storm in the 2024 season was about a category stronger because of anthropogenic climate change. I haven't even bothered to read it carefully because I just get so tired of some of these things. But you can sit there and jumble the numbers and do all sorts of stuff. Like I said, with the slide, if you don't properly handle the historical database, it's easy to come up with conclusions like that. So, but anyway, do we have any questions?
Yeah, I got one, Stan. There's been some discussion out there that we should make a Cat 6 definition for a storm, for the super high power storms. And, there's pros and cons for that. That maybe the original, 5 levels weren't enough because we hadn't been able to observe strengths as much, What do you think?
Okay, well, first of all, Cat 5 is quite strong enough. It's no problem at all to people they get blown away when you have these super intense storms. And there's a
Literally.
Cat 5. Yeah, there's a Cat. Oh, there you go. There's a Cat 5 for a reason. And they expect devastation. So I don't think we really need what NOAA has been working on, though, is, oh, I see that comment there. What NOAA has been working on is something that describes the other impacts. In other words, because just like that slide I showed, you have the storm surge, you have the tornadoes, you have the rainfall and stuff. So, but people just have to learn and educate themselves. And by the way, I want to mention something that I have my 5 Ps of preparedness, which is protect life and property, make sure you have your provisions, make sure you have your plans, know what you're going to do, but follow the predictions. And I say for people, go first to the National Hurricane Center site. That's hurricanesplural.gov, hurricanesplural.gov. Maybe Andy can even bring that up, because that's what everybody else gets their stuff from. Go there, read their discussion, look at their different graphics, then watch the news. Because some of the guys on the news and the media, we know they're all perfect. Some know what they're doing and are really great, and some have no clue or misstate a lot of things. So I really recommend people, there's nothing there. If you go to the East Pacific, if you click in the middle, you'll see some systems in the East Pacific right above that map. Yeah, you click on right above the map, East Pacific. Nah, you missed it, but there you go. So now we have some systems. We have another storm in the East Pacific. They start a little earlier than our season. They start May 15th. So it's not unusual to get storms now, but it's neat. Even if people look at the East Pacific, a really valuable tip. They've got a storm. Look at all the graphics they have available, all the discussions. And that way you're ready for that when we have a storm in the Atlantic for people to get affected by that. Thank you.
All right. Well, it's Q&A time, and I think we're going to have a lot of questions for you, Stan. So, Linnea, please take it away.
Wow, I can't believe I just got cut off.
Never seen it before.
Okay, so we have, I have this is not a question, this is a comment, but I'm curious if it's true or not, Stan. LT Oracle of Truth says hurricane season was in August and September until recently. Now it peaks in October and even into November.
No, that's not correct. Period. It varies year by year. It is June to November. So that statement is incorrect. The season is June to November, June 1st officially, although we've had storms every month of the year. But mainly June to November. The peak is still August, September, and October. It doesn't say we don't have storms in November or June, July, but the peak is still definitely August, September, October. Next.
All right, thank you. This is a good one. Chris Nisbet asks, are drones used for hunting or tracking hurricanes? What are the upsides and downsides of using drones?
Oh, I wish I had a slide ready. I'll tell you, I work with Joe Cione, who's one of the top people dealing with these drones. And we've had huge drones. It's called the NASA Global Hawk, which flew at 65,000 feet. It was a huge plane. And we processed the data on the ground. We did that for a few years. I remember processing in the middle of the night, sitting up in my bed and getting on my computer. But it was like, if you look at mission control for that huge drone, it looked like a space flight. I mean, a huge number of people, but the processing particular data, I'm at home there. But then you had these smaller drones. And I wish I could bring up a video or something. I might try and grab one that they literally drop out of the plane in a canister. And the previous one was Coyote. I forgot what the new one's called. And it's, about 3 feet long or so. And after it drops out, the wings go out It flies down, controlled by the plane, to very close to the surface where we definitely don't want to fly, and collects absolutely invaluable data. It's not so much the tracking the hurricane, it's going there to collect data that better understand that particular hurricane and better understand what makes hurricanes tick. And these are getting better and better. I remember the first time they had a talk and showing the flight track of this thing. And honestly, if you look at it, it looks like a little rubber band toy. I could not believe they could control this thing in the max winds in the eye wall and keep it on a decent flight path. I mean, I know it's tossed around a lot, but it's absolutely amazing. So yeah, the drones are being used, and they can actually go to the, thank you so much. I don't know if that's our drone. I'd have to look closer. There's our, yep. We got all sorts of video. Sondes. We've been using those, the GPS drop and sondes, since 1997, and that's the drones. You got all sorts of stuff popping up there. I don't know who that guy is, but the drop wind sondes drop down from the plane to the surface, measure temperature, pressure, wind, humidity, and they're like a CAT scan of the hurricane. And those get better and better, smaller, smarter. Well, recently we started using drifter sondes. Those weigh half an ounce each. And anybody who's seen Twister or Twisters, and they throw all these little balls up into the tornado, that's really what these are like. And they'll drop a bunch of them out of the chute from the plane at one time, and you're tracking, and then they're flying around in the storm. It's a
Well, you're dropping out a bit there, Stan. I don't know if there's.
I'd like to ask him about these.
The Hurricane Research Division is that you don't just get new instruments and throw them out there and take the measurements and give them over to the Weather Service, Hurricane Center. They have to calibrate. They have to interpret what the instruments are doing. They have to decide the right flight paths. I mean, they're very, very, very careful with everything. When the drop sondes first come out, let me tell you how real science is accomplished. They were screaming and yelling in the back halls at times, because people were yelling, no, it's only showing this and it's not averaging over this. And I mean, really, there's some almost knockdown dragouts. But sometimes that's how good iron sharpens irons. Good science is done, and we come up with some great stuff, and always learn more and more and more. Just to let you know, those are some of the most heavily instrumented aircraft in the world, and they measure anything from the most minute cloud particle up to the radar and winds and everything like that. So thank you for that great question.
I want to follow up. I want to follow up. So I guess I'm a little confused. Some things I would call technology, but I wouldn't call them drones because they're not actually flying on their own. If you drop something, it's like a rock. Okay, I've dropped a rock. This rock has technology in it that measures things, and it gets blown around. But it's unless I'm wrong, it's not self-correcting. And I would wonder. I have a question about how do drones hold up in that? I mean, hurricanes can move cars. Hurricanes, untoward winds move jets when they're landing, wind shear. So how do these little bitty drones actually fly through hurricanes and hold up?
Well,
Sterling, these things are huge. These are huge. I've been up next to the Global Hawk at Beale Air Force Base.
Well, that's the big one. He's talking about all these small ones that are
small ones. They can't get through that.
Let me first answer the question that's on the screen there. Are they recovered and reused? Things like the Global Hawk are this huge thing, but the smaller ones are not. We're flying them way out at sea, and these things can only fly for an hour or two. But the fact is, they are a wingspan of about 3 feet or so, 3.5 feet, and maybe he'll pull up specifically. You could say NOAA. Drones measure hurricanes. There's been a lot on that recently. You could probably find a video on that, but they really are controlled in the storm.
Well, shoot. I'll have him repeat that since he's cutting out
They're
again.
able to make things. What's that?
You cut out there while you were explaining that. What'd you say after they're controlled?
Yeah, they're controlled. The drop sondes are not drones. The drift sods, there, that's a good video right there. That shows how the wings go out and stuff. The drop sods are not drones. These are drones. We are controlling them from the plane. So someone on the plane is steering them, telling them to go way down, because we're dropping them from maybe 10,000 feet, 5,000 feet, and then it goes down near the surface. I mean, I think as low as like 150 feet, and they control it and can control. I hope I'm not losing you all. Okay.
Yeah, you dropped out again.
Okay, well, better than other times. So, but they are controlled, and they certainly are drones, and they're getting better and better. There's Miss Piggy. Our planes are, by the way, Miss Piggy, Kermit, and Gonzo. I kid you not. And there's stories behind those names. So, thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for that answer. I didn't know that they were using drones. That's really cool. They do
Oh, and
look
they're-
like
and they-
they would be kind of
Go ahead.
fragile, don't they? With those little.
They absolutely do. And they have measured, I forgot the highest winds they've measured. I think they've gotten up to 200 miles an hour. And I'm
That's
not
incredible.
exaggerating that I'm blown away that these are that good. And that's how good name drop Joe Cione is, who's over this whole project and stuff, and has been for years and years and years. And they used to have where the plane had to stay really close to control it. And the problem is then you couldn't do your normal pattern until that thing finished. Now they can fly further away and still control these things for, I think, up to an hour or 2 hours, and they can circumnavigate the eye wall.
That's amazing. All right.
It is.
Question from Chris Shattuck, who says, on the Sahara topic, when the Sahara was a savanna prior to 6,000 years ago, would that have altered hurricane generation presence and dynamics in the Gulf?
Well, let me look at the historical record on that. Oh, there is none. But there's lots of things that change and affect hurricane activity. So certainly things were different back then. You would have had different generation of the hurricanes and stuff. But speaking of Sahara, you have something called, I'll answer the question they didn't ask, the Saharan air layer. So we have one of the top experts who works with the Hurricane Research Division, another name drop, Jason Dunyan, who got about 50 interviews last week on this topic, because early in the season, you have this African dust outbreak that people have heard about, tends to suppress rainfall convection in the tropics, and therefore suppresses the hurricane activity. It doesn't totally shut it down, but it starts to drop off into August. And that's where you start to have the activity. There's a lot of reasons that August, September, October are the peak months, but that's actually one of them. So that is an interesting question there.
All right, great. Let's see. William Schugert asks, do the predictions take account of the fact that not all hurricanes make landfall?
We don't predict landfalls, period. So we're predicting the overall activity. It's like going out there and saying, someone's shooting guns at the U.S. or something, and we say, or big missiles or something, we say, well, we think there's going to be 20 missiles. We're not going to say where they're going to hit, but they have about 20 missiles. So we're just predicting the overall amount of activity. And in fact, I tend to be against predicting preferred landfall areas in these seasonal outlooks. So someone might say, well, this year we believe there's going to be more storms in the Gulf or more storms on the East Coast. And the problem is it just takes one. And they might be right in general, but it doesn't mean that other area is not going to get hit. So in fact, in 2005, a year that we remember, anybody who works with hurricanes don't want to even ever see that happen again, when it started in May or June and didn't stop till January. And there was Katrina and all sorts of storms. But the issue in 2001 is, I'll name drop AccuWeather put out an outlook in August, the beginning of the peak, and said, well, most of the storms early in the season have hit the Gulf area, but we predict the rest of the season is going to be generally the East Coast. So during the rest of the season, you had Katrina in the Gulf, you had Rita in the Gulf, and you had others. So I just steer away from those.
Yep. So I guess you won't be able to give an answer for this one, which is from
Well,
Albert. He says, when will the first
wait.
hurricane make landfall?
Oh, can we go back to the previous question for one moment? I'll come
Sure.
back to that. Can you, Andy, can you bring up slide number 25? Number 25. That one. Okay. When you talk about landfall, this is a very interesting from a paper in EOS by Dr. Chris Lancy. What a name for a meteorologist, Lancy. And what he did was he looked at the percent.
Oh, shoot. Stan.
So before you had.
Stan, sorry, you cut out there again. You're going to have to start that one over. What was he looking at?
Right. So he's looking at the percent of the number of tropical cyclones in the Atlantic that were observed, they're listed in the historical record, versus the number that actually hit land. And if you look on the left portion, before we had any reconnaissance, numerous years, 100% of those observed hit land. What that means is if it didn't hit land, they didn't know what was there. And then as soon as you had aircraft reconnaissance, the number of 100% years dropped tremendously. Then when you got satellite, not a single year was 100%. And that's very important because we simply weren't observing a lot of the ones out there before. So that I just threw that in because of the landfall. Now you can go to the next question.
All right, great. Let's see. Okay, for hurricane modeling, what inputs go into the models and who comes up with the actual logic in them? Does CO2 factor in?
Right. Was there a question right before that I skipped because I went back to the landfall?
This one was related. So when will the first hurricane make landfall in the US this season?
This is very important, and I'm not gonna say it publicly, but just between us, Connie Chung, remember that? Just between you and us is that we're making a spreadsheet right now at our lab. Don't tell anybody about this, and we're all going to put down the dates that we feel will have the first depression, first named storm, first hurricane, first major hurricane, and first U.S. landfall. So after everybody fills it in, I'll tell you when it's going to be. It could be any time. We could have one at the end of June. We could have one in June, July, August. We don't know when the first landfall will be. That will go to the next question.
Are you taking bets on that, by the way?
We used to put in stuff, but we don't do that anymore. I said that the winner will be proud of the fact that he's brilliant or a good guesser. So that's the prize we're going to have this year. Yeah, but I literally just put that spreadsheet together today. Don't tell anybody out there. Okay, go ahead. Next question now.
Okay, Chris asks, what inputs go into the models and who comes up with the actual logic in the models? Do CO2 levels factor in?
Well, the issue is that the models that we're working with are for that year. So it takes a lot of factors in. This is not like 20, 30-year models that we're predicting a season with. So yeah, how much CO2 is in the atmosphere is in there, but we're not talking about increased CO2 because it's whatever is current at that particular time. So they might run the model in May to see what it's going to be like in August, September, October. As far as the logic in the models, oh my goodness. These things, the code is huge. There's all sorts of different scales, small scale, medium scale, cloud factor.
Oh, there we go again. Sorry about the connection here, guys.
And I know I'm losing you. I lost you for a
second.
second.
It's always tough with a live show.
Yeah, but that's okay. We're doing better than I usually do on this. But so CO2 is just factors in because it's there. On the climate, long-term climate models where they're running at 20, 50 years and stuff, yes, they're increasing CO2. But the issue is there's so many problems, as has been shared with some of those models, and they're maybe qualitatively correct, but listen, they're models. There's the model world and the real world. And even if the model results, and this applies even to 3 and 5 day forecasts for hurricanes, the results could look reasonable, very reasonable. I mean, they can show the structure of the hurricane and everything. It doesn't mean it's fact, but they're getting better and better. And let me say something with modeling. Thankfully, through huge amounts of research through the years, compared to the accuracy of the track models, back with Hurricane Andrew at 92, The 120-day forecast, 120, oh, I wish, 120-hour forecast, 5-day forecast now are equivalent to the errors of the 2-day, 48-hour forecast 30 some odd years ago. These track forecasts have improved dramatically. Doesn't mean they're always right. We do miss it at times, but it's tremendous improvement. The intensity is much harder, but it's getting a little bit better one step at a time. It's just much more complicated, but that's wonderful. There's been so many advancements through huge amount of work by many, many, many people.
Okay, I'm going to pitch this next question
Looking
to
through your
Anthony.
questions.
Give Anthony a moment here, because this is a question that both of you can answer, but I want to know about some of this as well. This is from a meteorologist going by CCM 591 who says, I'm a retired NWS meteorologist, but I never really understood why upper level wind shear enhances organized convection over land, but tears apart tropical systems over oceans.
Go for it, Anthony.
That's a great question. And I honestly don't have an answer that I can formulate right at the moment, but let me give some thought to it. First of all, we do know that it does, in fact, tear apart tropical systems when we have this strong wind shear. And I think it probably had to do with the fact that the convection over land and convection over sea is a little bit different. In land situations, we have very powerful convections due to the heating of the ground, by solar energy. But in the sea conditions, the convections are not as strong, and the updrafts are not as strong because we're trying to heat the surface of the ocean with the sun isn't nearly as efficient as trying to heat the ground. And so I think because the nature of the convection is weaker in ocean systems, that's why the wind shear tears it apart more effectively.
Okay, I'm
Stan,
ready
if
to
you
answer
know
that, but yeah, if you give me just a moment, I'm going to quickly, can I email it to you, Andy? I hope I can. I'm going to quickly email you a perfect slide for that. Made to perfection. So let me
I'm not entirely sure that we're going to be able to have time, but we'll keep that on in mind, and we'll try to get to another question that I can pitch to somebody while we wait here.
Well, let me just answer the question, but I'll still send him the slide.
Sure.
And that is what happens over the land, it's a totally different dynamics that's going on over land. So I won't talk about that. But over the ocean, the hurricane to intensify due to all sorts of dynamics, at the center warms. And when the center column of air in that eye warms, it lowers the pressure. Well, for that to happen, the hurricane has to organize in the vertical like a chimney. And when that organizes in the vertical like a chimney, you get more of that warming. If the winds are different on the lower level and the upper level, it's going to do it like this, tilts that chimney. So we have a lot of studies on how tilt affects the hurricane. So the column is going to be organized rather than straight up and down. It's going to be organized. I'm trying to get with my screen here to the side. That's why it inhibits it. And frankly, a strong storm, a strong vertical shear can flat out.
Shoot. I hope someone's tracking his cutouts on a chart or something so we can see if they're messing with us on purpose. Anyway, sorry, Stan, you dropped out again. Seems like we're having some connection issues. Well, can you guys hear me?
There you
Yeah, you're here now. You're back. Okay.
So go ahead. You can go to the next question, and I'll send this to him anyway.
Alrighty, sounds good. Okay, so I have a question from Stan Pickett, which I think Anthony can answer real quick while we're here, who says, are wind speeds faster the higher you go up in the hurricane eye?
That's a great question. If you want me to answer, Anthony probably knows the answer to that too.
As fast as possible, because we are definitely running out of time.
And he's frozen again. Well, yes, the answer is yes. The higher up you go, the faster the wind speed is because there's less surface friction.
Okay, I'm
and so
back.
forth.
I think I'm back.
Yeah,
Okay,
you're
so
back.
what happened?
And he's gone
Surface,
again.
because
Okay,
okay,
I'm sorry,
man.
guys.
How about now? The wind.
All right.
It's like a Monty Python sketch. That's really funny. I'm sorry.
Oops.
Okay, I'm back again, right? I'm going to talk quickly. The winds are slightly lower at the surface because of friction, but when you go up even 300 or 400 feet to 500 feet, you can end up with a category stronger. So they definitely get stronger with height. Did you hear any of that?
Yes,
Yes.
we got it.
Right, which
All
is
right.
why satellite estimates of storm speeds might be higher than ground-based wind estimates.
Surface estimates.
Not
Absolutely.
necessarily true because those satellite estimates are tuned to represent what they expect on the surface. So
Yeah,
they're
but
not
it's a guess.
observing
It's a
the
guess.
winds. They're not observing the winds up aloft. They're looking at the structure of the storm, the Dvorak technique. So they're associating that. There are a lot of studies, but that's why the importance of these drop wind sondes. The drop wind sondes are the first time out at sea we were actually measuring the winds near the surface. Everything else was estimated. Hurricane Andrew, we had estimates at 10,000 feet, and they have a formula. They get it to the surface. But with the drop wind sondes, we're actually sending an instrument right there near the surface, and I processed a lot of those from the planes.
This is kind of a
And-
good
and-
question in jest.
Go
I'm
ahead.
gonna pitch this question to Jim, actually. Jim, will hurricanes be stronger now that they've renamed the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America?
Of course they will be. That is the big factor that nobody has been bringing in this conversation. I'm very glad. Thanks, Matt G. Of course they'll be stronger.
All right, we're gonna do.
But you
we
know
have
what?
two more
I feel
questions.
we
have two
I
more
feel
questions, and we're gonna
rebuked
do
now
rapid
because-
fire here.
They'll
if we
be
can.
big and beautiful too.
Yeah,
Exactly.
big, beautiful hurricanes. All right. Are house construction standards different in hurricane prone areas? And is it even worth trying to build a house that can withstand a hurricane?
That
Yes,
is
they are.
Oh,
but
go ahead.
yeah, housing constructions standards are different in hurricane prone areas. Hurricane prone areas get things like hurricane ties for roofing and stuff like that.
The building codes vary tremendously. Dr. Neil Frank, who's former director of the Hurricane Center, laughs at some of the building codes in some of these areas. Miami, they're very strong, and we're breaking. No, I think I'm still there. Miami, they're very strong, but even with the codes, it depends. There's all sorts of ways people cut corners, and we saw that during Andrew, where certain storms did really well and other ones did not. And I crashed nonstop here, yeah. But go ahead. And if you did get that slide for the vertical shear, it's a very good slide.
I'm not sure that we have time, but I have one more question here from the audience, which is, does solar activity intensify storms? From Rick Harris.
Solar activity doesn't directly intensify storms. I took off my my background, so maybe that'll help a little better. But it doesn't directly affect. It's going to affect circulation, the ocean temperatures, different things that then do affect storms. So that's a complicated question, and there's solar cycles, and I'm not the expert on that particular area. So Andy, did you ever get that slide? A very interesting slide. Slide 3 from that new one I sent you.
He's gesturing I don't know in the background. I don't think he
Oh,
got
okay.
it.
Okay, that's fine. We won't
But,
worry about it then.
I actually think that's all the time we have here, unfortunately. I'm going to pass it back to Jim. We have run out of questions, but we do have this good quote, or this good comment from DJ Bo over on Rumble, who says, Gulf of America hurricanes will be the strongest. You've never seen anything like them. They'll be amazing. Thank you very much, DJ Bo.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Lene, for handling that Q&A with Stan Goldenberg. And I'm very sorry for that. We had a little bit of a latency problem there, but we powered through it. And maybe we'll get a little better internet connection when we have him back on again, maybe at the end of hurricane season or sometime in the middle. That will do it for the show today. I want to thank Andy Singer, our producer, spinning a lot of plates back there in the background, trying to keep this thing together. Thank you very much, Andy. Thank our guest, of course, Stan Goldenberg. Always visit climaterealism.com for some great counterspin on the legacy media's alarmist narrative on the climate. Go to climateataglance.com for the latest data on various aspects of the climate and weather around the world. Go to Energy at a Glance to learn more about the truth about our energy sources and the so-called green solutions to them. I want to thank our streaming partners, Junk Science, CFACT, CO2 Coalition, Climate Depot, and What's Up With That, and Heartland UK Europe. Always go to heartland.org and subscribe to the Climate Change Weekly newsletter, which our own Sterling Burnett produces almost every single week. Thank you again for being here. Really enjoyed all the interaction in the chat, and we will talk to you again next Friday. Bye-bye.
Come on, man.